Well, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, or however long the Lord leads, we're going to be studying primarily from the book of Daniel. Now, in this book, God permitted a heathen, unsaved king to have 2 dreams, which God used to foretell the history of the world and the political powers of the world, what was going to come. See, our whole series has been what the future is. Well, we've had the future of Israel, and we've had the future of the false religious system. Now we're going to have the future of the political system and social system and the you might say cultural system. All of these are exemplified by Babylon. Remember, we had Babylon, which represents the false religious world. Well, Babylon also represents the political world and the cultural world and the social world in different ways. And he let a king named Nebuchadnezzar have 2 dreams about this. And then God gave Daniel 4 visions which tend to elucidate and expand upon the dreams that Nebuchadnezzar had. God first used Daniel, the prophet Daniel, to interpret the dreams for Nebuchadnezzar, and then Daniel had visions. And we're going to tie these in together and show you how God predicted the future of the kingdoms of the world 600 years before Christ, because that's when this came about. Now, we're not going to do a verse by verse of the entire book of Daniel. We'll be starting well into the 2nd chapter, so I guess I better give a little history to make sure that we have our setting right. You'll recall that when God called Abraham to be the progenitor of a special people, that he told Abraham that he was going to give him a land for this people. And it would be a very particular land, would have natural boundaries, so it would be easily defended, and it would be more productive than most lands. As a matter of fact, some years it would produce so much that the next 2 years they wouldn't have to farm. They'd get enough growing up in 1 year to last 2 more years. Now that's pretty good farming, isn't it? And you'll recall that God, before there ever was a nation to go into these lands, or before the nation was ever in the land, he told them how they could enjoy the land, or on what circumstances they could enjoy it, and on what circumstances they would be taken out of the land. We studied this back when we were studying Israel, remember, in the 26th chapter of Leviticus and the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy. In Leviticus, these curses and blessings, as they were called, were given to the first generation of the Israelites that came out of Egypt, out of captivity in Egypt, and then they were given to the second generation by Moses in the book of Deuteronomy. But you'll recall, he said that certain things would bring about blessings in the land, and certain things, or certain activities on their part, would bring about curses. And in the 26th chapter of Leviticus, Moses, by the power of God, enumerates these certain things that would happen. He says, well, now if you won't do right, I'll bring famine. And then after that, if you don't do right, I'll let some surrounding nation come and enslave you. And he says, I'll try every way in the world. And if all of these things won't work, then I'll have to dispossess you from the land for a while. And so we come to a time 600 years before Christ. The nation had been in the land then maybe 700 or 800 years, and they had disobeyed God repeatedly. And he had warned them again and again, and then they became very evil and were involved in the same type of sins that the nations who had previously indwelt the land, the same types of sin that involve those nations. So God said, I'm going to do what I said I would do. I'm going to banish you from your land, and the land will waste and die away and become desolate. And so he raised up a king, King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And this king came and conquered the city of Jerusalem, tore down its walls, and completely destroyed the temple, and took, in 2 or 3 different episodes, he took all of the hierarchy of the Jewish nation back to Babylon into captivity. He left some of the poorer and less adept people there to fend for themselves. They had no real government, you might say. They just were there. And but the more learned ones and the more cultured ones he took back to Babylon. And he decided that a good thing to do was each nation that he conquered, Nebuchadnezzar ruled all of the known world. God gave him the power to conquer anybody he wanted to. He gave him dominion over the entire earth. That's how far his authority exerted. And he didn't necessarily extend it that far, but God gave him the right to conquer the whole world. And he did conquer and rule the known world at that time. And one of his methods was this, to take the most brilliant of the young men from the conquered nation and bring them into his own culture. And he hoped in this way to build it up. He had learned already by inbreeding and so forth a nation deteriorates. And so he said, what I'll do is I'll bring in the most brilliant minds and the finest people from the conquered land. And so among the Israelites, he brought right within his court 4 young men. One of them's name was Daniel, and then you'll remember he gave the names Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to the others. Those were their new Babylonian names. Their Hebrew names are not quite so well known. It was Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And Daniel is the Hebrew name of Daniel. It means judge of God. And his name, they changed his name to Belteshazzar. They took their Hebrew names away and gave them Babylonian names. And he took these 4 young men right into his court. And the first chapter of Daniel is about these 4 young men, Daniel and the other 3, in the court of King Nebuchadnezzar as he was the ruler over all the world. And then beginning the 2nd chapter, we find that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and it disturbed him very much, and he called in all of his wise men and sorcerers and so forth, and asked them to tell him what the dream was, and then interpret it. He said it just slipped his mind. And they said, why, you're asking something that's impossible. Nobody could tell you what you dreamed. Now, if you tell us what you dreamed, we'll interpret it for you. That's what they claimed they could do. The next time he told them the dream, and they still couldn't interpret it, but that's what they said anyway, that they could interpret it for him if he would explain the dream. He says, how can I explain the dream when it slipped my mind? Now, if you tell me what I dreamed, well, then it'll come back to my mind, and I'll know whether it was what I dreamed or not. They says, no, we can't do that. Nobody could do that. And he says, well, you'll either do it or off with all of your heads. The whole court, including Daniel and his friends. And so when Daniel found out about that everybody was going to get their heads chopped off because nobody could tell the king what he dreamed, he said to the head man, well, tell the king not to be so hasty. And he told this to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard. He says, just let me have a little time to pray and talk to the Lord. He says, I know a God that can interpret all dreams, can do anything. And he says, I'll find out what it's all about by consulting God. And then in Daniel, the 2nd chapter, the 19th verse, we find, then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. And Daniel blessed the God of heaven. And Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever. For wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the season. He removes kings, sets up kings. He gives wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to those who know understanding. He says he reveals the deep secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. Then he says, to God I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, and has made known unto me now what we desired of thee, for thou hast made known unto me the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went into Arioch, that was the captain of the guard, who the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. And he went and said thus unto them, destroy not the wise men of Babylon, bring them in before the king. And he says, I'll show unto the king the interpretation. And Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. And the king answered and said, Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation of it? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king? But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets and makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter times. Now, what's what this dream is all about? Daniel says, God is letting Nebuchadnezzar know what shall be in the latter days. That's one key phrase. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what would come to pass hereafter? And he who reveals secret makes known to thee what shall come to pass. So we find that what this king dreamed about was things that shall come to pass in the latter days. Well, we're in the latter days. So actually, what he showed the king was everything that was going to come to pass beginning then, right through to the latter days. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation of the king, and that thou might know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, saw and beheld a great image. Now, Daniel here is telling the king what he dreamed. This is, it's one thing to interpret a dream, and it's a little harder to tell a guy what he dreamed. Suppose I were to wake up and say, Graham, look, I dreamed a dream last night. And I know it really was something, but it shocked me so that it went right out of my mind. Now, I want you to explain that dream to me. And he said, well, tell me the dream, and I'll see if I can explain it. And he says, no, I can't say it. Not like the king. I said, I can't tell you what it is. It slipped my mind. And he'd look at me, and he'd say, well, man, what do you think I am? But that's what Daniel was doing. He's first telling him what his dream was. He says, you saw a great image. 31st verse, where this great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form of it was terrible. The image's head was of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of brass, its legs of iron, its feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon its feet, that were of iron and clay, and broke them to pieces. Then were the iron and the clay and the brass and silver and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, but no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Now he told the dream. That was what Nebuchadnezzar saw. Now he's going to explain to Nebuchadnezzar what it meant. He says in the 36th verse, he says, this is the dream, and we will tell its interpretation before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given to thee a kingdom, power, and strength and glory, and wherever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. Now, this goes back to the fact that God gave dominion in this world to man. It's always been God's purpose that man should rule in this earth. You'll recall that man has forfeited that right of rule to Satan. Now here, Nebuchadnezzar stands for two different he has two different symbolic meanings. Number one, he stands for the Babylonian kingdom, which is the head of gold. Daniel says, you and your kingdom are this head of gold. Now he says, now the other thing that Nebuchadnezzar stands for is man himself. And you're going to see this. He stands for the human race as such. The 39th verse. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. Now notice, you've got four different metals. You've got a head of gold, and then you've got a chest and arms of silver, and then you've got a midsection and thighs of brass, and then you have legs of iron. And if you stop and think, even though these metals become progressively less valuable, they are progressively stronger. You can take a bar of gold and beat it to death with a bar of silver, because silver is more durable than gold. It's harder. And if you had a war between silver and gold, the silver would win out. And the same thing would be between brass or bronze. Actually, they didn't have brass as such back there. This is bronze, which is an alloy of copper. Bronze is stronger than silver. And if you had a silver bar and a bronze bar, and you began to hammer them together, well, the silver bar would get flattened out in the process, because bronze is more durable, it's stronger. And then if you go on down to iron, you would find that the iron is stronger than the brass. So what's going to happen here? We're going to have kingdoms that are progressively stronger, but kingdoms which are progressively inferior. Notice Daniel says the next kingdom that's going to come about is going to be inferior. Well, we're going to see that these kingdoms, as we go along here, I'll let you in on it now. The Babylonian kingdom is the head of gold. It was very much of an imperial kingdom. The king was all-powerful. He had right of life or death, and he ruled with absolute power and majesty. Everything was completely in his hands. Then that kingdom was defeated by a joint effort of two kingdoms. The Medes and the Persians joined together, and in joining together, they came and defeated Babylon. They were stronger than Babylon. But the kingdom was not as powerful. That is to say, it was not as regal. It was an inferior kingdom. It didn't hold the same sway. For instance, a king of the Medes and Persians, he couldn't change his own law. If he ever made a decree, he couldn't change it. Well, that limited his power. The law of the Medes and Persians didn't permit that. Well, notice there's some imagery here, because you had the Medo-Persian Empire, which destroyed Babylon, had two parts. You're going to see some more figures in here of that. And just like this statue, you see, the part that's represented by this Medo-Persian kingdom has two arms. And then you go down, and you'll find that the Medo-Persian kingdom was destroyed by Alexander the Great, by the Greeks. And he is the bronze part of this, the midsections. And then the Greek Empire was destroyed by the Roman Empire. And it was divided, and there again you have your imagery of the loins with the two legs extending from it. And you say, how do we know that? Well, all you have to do is study the rest of the book of Daniel, and it just opens up beautifully. It just comes right out and tells you. But I'm letting you in on it in advance because I want you to understand what these four kingdoms represent. They represent the only four kingdoms in the whole history of the world that have ruled the entire civilized world. Babylon ruled the entire civilized world. The Medo-Persian Empire took this world rule away from the Babylonians. And then the Greeks under Alexander, Philip of Macedon, and then his son Alexander, took the kingdom away from the Medo-Persians. Remember the wars with Xerxes and so forth. And then the Romans took it away from the Greeks. Now, each one of these kingdoms becomes less regal in their authority, but more powerful, just like the metals become more powerful. Now, those are the only four nations that have ever ruled the known world. Now, others have tried, but Napoleon never made it. He met his Waterloo. And Hitler tried it, but he never made it, did he? There has been no single world ruler since the Roman Empire. And that's what we have here, the four world empires. And Daniel, of course, lived during the time of the first one. Now look at the 40th verse. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues everything, or all things, and as iron that breaks all these shall break in pieces and bruise. Because the winner over all of this succession is going to be the iron one, because it's stronger. At that time, iron was the strongest metal you could possibly find. But notice, whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, a part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Well, that happened, you'll remember. But there shall be in it of the strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Now look at the 43rd verse. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave or adhere one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings, plural, which kings? When part of it's iron and part of it's clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Now, turn back to the 40th verse. And between the 40th verse and the 41st verse is a long period of time which the prophet Daniel didn't see. Because all of history between the fall of the Roman Empire and the coming of the Antichrist, which is still future, all of that history is in between these two verses. Because, you see, the Old Testament prophets were permitted to see only that time in which Israel was a nation as such and lived in their own land. And they were divested completely of their land in 70 A.D. That's when the Roman emperor came and destroyed the temple that had been rebuilt. And the Jews were scattered everywhere and no longer able to live at all in their land. No Jews lived in the land at all for centuries and centuries. And it was just a wasteland, a desert land. If you'd gone to Israel 200 years ago, you wouldn't have seen enough vegetation to keep a goat alive, hardly. Just a few nomadic tribes of Arabs here and there. It was just a wasteland. And it had been that way for centuries. Well, the Old Testament prophets only prophesy concerning the times when Israel is in the land. Well, Israel was not in the land from 70 A.D. until just recently. And so, during that time, you don't have any prophets. And over again in your Old Testament, it just focuses together as if there were no time in between at all. You're going to see that again and again in the book of Daniel. How it's just as though there was nothing there. Well, what God has done, He's interjected something new in between 70 A.D. and the time when God will start dealing with the nation of Israel again. This is called the church age. And that's not seen by the Old Testament prophets. It's as though the clock stopped at 70 A.D. as far as the Old Testament prophecies are concerned, and then it started again. Sometime centuries and centuries later. Well, where you see that hiatus of the stopped clock is between the 40th and the 41st verses of the 2nd chapter of Daniel. Because, see, the fourth kingdom that's described in the 40th verse is an iron kingdom. And the same area where it is, it becomes one of mixed iron and clay. And that simply means that there will be a great profusion of nations, some strong and some weak. And that's what we have today. And in fact, is we've never had it since that time to the extent we have it today in the United Nations. This is a beautiful picture, you know, with the great powers that have veto rights, and then the little powers that really have no power. You don't have any power in the United Nations unless you have veto power, and that's reserved for the big powers. So you've got nations of iron and nations of clay, and it says they'll mingle themselves together or come together as a conglomerate mass. And it speaks of 10 toes. Well, in the Bible, 10 just means sufficient for the purpose, for the situation. It doesn't mean necessarily exactly 10. It means a profusion, a sufficient number. And so what we have here in the toes, partly of iron, the feet and toes, partly of iron and partly of clay, what we have there is a picture of the way the world is going to be when God comes to set up His kingdom. That's the way it is now, and that's the way it's going to remain. You're not going to have a world ruled by communism. Communism is part of the iron here, see. You're not going to have a world ruled by communism. You're going to have a world which is partly strong nations and partly weak nations. Now notice, in the 44th verse, in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. Now this is the kingdom under the Lord Jesus Christ. It's the one you pray for when you say, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. What kingdom? That one where as it is in heaven, so shall it be on earth. So that kingdom's going to come. Now notice back here how that was set up in the 35th verse. Notice in the last part of the 35th verse, it says that no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Well, this great mountain, the word mountain stands figuratively in the Bible for a great nation or a great kingdom. And that'll fit over again. So it's going to be a nation that will fill the whole world. Well, that's going to be the kingdom under the Lord Jesus Christ. Let's read on and see. We're back in the 44th verse. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Now this is describing, in another way, the battle of Armageddon, when Christ shall come and destroy all the kingdoms of this earth. 45th verse. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, which describes Christ, and that it broke in pieces the iron, and the brass, and the clay, and the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king that what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation is sure. Now Daniel is saying to Nebuchadnezzar that you've seen a vision, or you dreamed a dream, which represents the coming history of the world. And he says, one day, when all the world shall be equally or divided among weak nations and strong nations, and nations that won't stick together, they won't adhere or cleave to one another, and you've certainly got that now. You can't get any two or three of them hardly to agree on anything for any length of time. They don't stick together. The United Nations is just a hodgepodge and doesn't really accomplish anything, and it never will. Because why? Because God says iron and clay won't mix. They won't stick together. In other words, what God's saying is the whole political aspect of the world is walking on feet that are made partly of iron and partly of clay, and it won't hold them up. And that's how God sees the political structure of the world. He sees it all right as far as the head's concerned, because God has said man shall have dominion. See? And so that part of it's fine. It's the goal means it's divinely ordained that man shall rule. But his activities, represented by the hands and arms, are inferior to what his ordained position is. What he does. You see, in the Bible, when you use hands and arms figuratively, you're talking about what a person is involved in as far as his activities are concerned. This is what you mean. Well, we use that. We say, give me a hand. Or why don't you take this in hand? We mean become involved in it. We're using the phrase figuratively. Well, this is what it means figuratively in the Bible. It means that the activity in which you become involved. So man is in his right place as far as wanting to rule the earth, you see. It's all right for man to want to have dominion over the earth because that's what God has ordained. And so the head of gold is all right. It's divinely ordained. But the activities that come about are inferior to what God has ordained. Then the next thing you have is the loins. Well, this is always figurative in the Bible for strength, or the place from which you're strength. And man shoves his weight around in the wrong place. He's strong in the wrong aspects. And then as we get down to his legs are representative of where he goes, what his direction is. And the Bible says man's direction is all off. He's headed to the wrong destination. Man wants to go, or he wants to pursue an end which will glorify man. And we're going to see this in the next dream here in just a minute, just how this operates. So God says, this whole statue, this whole great image which Nebuchadnezzar saw, is man's political destiny as God sees it. And he sees it stemming from the right volition or the right head, but engaged in the wrong activities, using its strength the wrong way, going in the wrong direction, long end result, and it just won't stand on that kind of feet. He sees the world situation standing on a foundation that won't hold it up. And it's going to topple with all of its golden head. It's going to topple. And the way it's going to topple is the smiting stone is going to smite it. You see, Jesus Christ is the rock and he is the stone. The smitten rock is Christ and the smiting stone is Christ. He was smitten for our salvation. He's called the cleft rock. He was smitten for us. But the smitten stone, the smitten rock, shall become the smiting stone. And, of course, he's the stone of stumbling, you might say, to the Jewish nation. That's what he's called. Peter called him that. He's the foundation stone for the church on which we build. But he's the smiting stone as far as the nations are concerned. The world political system shall end by the smiting stone. That's what's going to end it. So here you have this great statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw, representing the world political system. which had the right beginning because God ordained that, see. But it keeps getting worse until by the time you get down to the feet where we are now, it's a mess. And it simply won't stand on its own feet. Now that's God's picture of the world structure politically. Now notice in the 46th verse, this fact that Daniel could interpret this dream made an impression on old Nebuchadnezzar. Now he didn't get saved, you might say. He didn't get converted. You watch the language there and you'll see. But he knew that the power of God was operating. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel. Now if he'd have been spiritually right, well, he wouldn't have worshipped Daniel because Daniel just got through telling him that it's nothing I did. He says there's a God that's able to reveal secrets. Don't give me any credit. But he worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation of sweet odors to him. And the king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God, now he didn't say my God. He's not claiming God, see. He says your God. He represents that he is the God. Your God is the God of God, or the God of God, and the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, things thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. That would be like, say, making him the head man in Washington, D.C. And the chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king that he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. In other words, he was like the prime minister. Now in the 3rd chapter, we get Nebuchadnezzar's interpretation. Now remember, Nebuchadnezzar stands for man as he forms his own destiny. Now, God sees man as a statue with a head of gold and feet of miry clay, mixture of clay and iron. Now let's see what Nebuchadnezzar sees when he sees man's political structure. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold. He makes the whole thing of gold. See, man doesn't see himself with feet half of clay and half of iron. He sees him whole self as gold. He's pretty proud of what he is. And he thinks he can pull himself up by his own bootstraps, and he believes that by the power of his own will, eventually he's going to get this thing structured right, and so he makes it all of gold. So this statue that we're going to see in the 3rd chapter is man and his political destiny as man sees it. And the one in the 2nd chapter was man and his political destiny as God sees it. Well, there's a difference. Notice, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, that's 60, and the breadth of it was 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Now, it's very important that it's in Babylon, and it's quite important that it's 6'6". Now, if you go back to the last verse of the 13th chapter of Revelation, you'll find that the mark of the beast is 666. Well, this is where the 66 of the 666 comes from. If you want that 600 part of it, you'll have to go back and find Pharaoh's 600 chariots. But this is where the imagery 666 comes from. It comes from the 600 chariots and Nebuchadnezzar's golden image, which was 6 by 6. And you put these together and you get 666, 666. We'll go into that a little further. Probably start next week's lesson by saying something about 666, and we'll tie this in with it. 3rd chapter, the 2nd verse. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes and the governors and the captains and the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces. That means all from the governors down to the mayors and everybody else, even probably the county commissioners, to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Now, man requires that anybody in human authority do it man's way. Won't have it any other way. I've told you before. if you were to apply for a job in the United Nations, that is, as a United States representative in the United Nations, even if it were a secretary or whatever it was, if you were to come into contact with any foreign government, you would have to agree that you would never, around those international personages, ever mention the name of Christ, because some people would be offended by it. Christ is not permitted anywhere near the United Nations, not by our own, quote, Christian government. His name's never mentioned there. In fact, it's specifically excluded, not just overlooked. And we want to do our things our way. We don't mind bringing God in if the astronauts get in trouble. It's all right to have a day of prayer or a prayer for them up there, something like that. It's their own business. But we don't want Jesus Christ to have anything to do with our international relationships. And you won't find any time any of our diplomats are dealing internationally, you will never hear of them uttering a prayer. In fact, that'd be the quickest way that you get shunted right out of the diplomatic service. If you were to ever have a meeting with some other international figure and be involved in prayer to God, you leave him out of that. When you got your own private affair, and as I say, you're trying to get the astronauts back from their busted spaceship or something like that, it's perfectly all right to pray if you want to. But God has no right to meddle in our international affairs, and we're not going to have it. This nation and other nations don't either. You think it through and pursue that, and you'll find that's true. Because look what he wants. Look at the third verse. Then the princes and the governors and the captains and the judges and the treasurers and the counselors and the sheriffs and the county commissioners and the mayors and the governors and the attorney generals and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together into the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Man has set up his own image of what his political destiny is. Then a herald cried aloud to you, it is commanded, O people, nations and languages. See the language here? All the people, all the nations, all the languages, that at the time ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up, and whosoever falleth not down and worship, the worship shall the same hour be cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, and all the kinds of music, all the people and the nations and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Now here you have. Man says, when I play my tune, I want you to pay attention. And if you don't pay attention when man plays his tune, well, you're going to answer in the fiery furnace. If you don't believe it, you just watch what's going to happen to Israel. Because, you see, although God says he's angry at the nations because they parted my land, he says. You know that why the Bible says, God says that's why he's angry at the nations? Because they parted his land. Now, he put it back together again. See, they parted. United Nations is who carved Israel all up. And, looks like a New England gerrymander of the first water, if you ever saw one. And worse than a jigsaw puzzle, and that's what we did, put together a jigsaw puzzle. Worse than that. Carved it up like that. Well, God put it back together. Now, we're the main ones. Did you realize, you remember when we were studying the future of the destiny of Israel, and it said that whoever would confederate themselves with Egypt would be lost, or would suffer the curse of God? I found another verse that went along with that you might be interested in. Hold your place there in Daniel 3 and turn back to Isaiah. Isaiah 54, I believe it was. God is speaking there to the nation of Israel. Isaiah 54, verse 15. Behold, they shall surely gather together in the United Nations, and not by me. In other words, I didn't start that thing, he says. Whosoever shall gather together against thee, that is Israel, shall fall for thy sake. Look at the 17th verse. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. Now, we were sort of standing up for Israel, but now we're right in the forefront of them that says, well, we want that nation divided again. And the Egyptians are just clapping their hands at what we're saying. Say, yeah, what this guy said, he says, I'm saying yes, 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 yes. And Israel saying, no, 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 no. See, we've joined over. We're counseling with those that are counseling against them. And remember in Ezekiel, the 30th chapter, what God said about that? Ezekiel 30, verse 6, thus saith the Lord, they also that uphold Egypt shall fall. Now, if there's one country in the world I don't want to uphold, it's Egypt, because God says anybody that upholds Egypt will fall. Well, now, I'm real happy for Russia to uphold Egypt. That's Ezekiel chapter 30, verse 6. Now, if you think that's referring to some other time, all you have to do is just read all the context here, and you'll see it's talking about that time when Israel shall be gathered together. See up in the 29th chapter, the 21st verse, and in that day will I cause the horn of the house of Israel to bud forth. Now, we've already talked about what the horn means. That means when they'll have the ability to push, like a bull does with his horn. And I will give thee the opening of the mouth in the midst of them. All through here, you'll see that this is talking about the day that we're living in. For instance, look way back over in the 28th chapter, the 25th verse. Thus saith the Lord God, when I shall have gathered the house of Israel from the people among whom they are scattered. Well, that's not talking about sometime way back in history. That's talking about now. And it says, at that time, at the present time, thus saith the Lord, they also that uphold Egypt shall fall. Right. All I can say is somebody up there hasn't been reading the Bible very regular, or they wouldn't be climbing on Egypt's bandwagon. It says whoever counsel against Israel will fall too. What were you going to say?
Isn't there a verse somewhere down in Kelso that we should pray for the peace of Jerusalem? Does that mean that we should, even though we know that God is going to deliver them from the enemy?
Well, of course, that's primarily to the nation of Israel, that the only time that they'll ever see peace is when the peace in Jerusalem, but that's a proper prayer for any of God's people, because when you say, I'm praying for the peace of Jerusalem, it means that you're longing in your heart for the Lord to come and set up His righteous rule on earth. It's the same thing. To pray for the peace of Jerusalem is the same thing as praying the Lord's Prayer. Now, the average person that recites what we call the Lord's Prayer, they don't have the slightest idea what they're praying for. Now, you listen. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. In other words, let all the earth proclaim God's righteousness. Hallowed be thy name on earth. See? Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. His will's not being done on earth now. And so the whole prayer, the Lord's Prayer, is a prayer for that time that we're talking about right here, when this destroying mountain or the smiting stone shall come and start beating on that toes of iron and clay until that statue falls down. That's what you're praying for when you pray the Lord's Prayer. And you're doing the same thing when you pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Now, most of us that get up in a church and that thing, we don't have that in mind at all. But that's what the Lord has in mind. That's what He was telling the disciples. You want something to pray for? You pray for the time when the kingdom will be set up on this earth, so that the earth is involved in God's will like heaven is. Isn't it something where we can take a little thing like that and twist it all around and make it mean something entirely different? Okay. This whole exercise here is a picture of how man insists on people conforming. When the world opinion blows its horn, everybody is supposed to get in line. If the world opinion says that Israel's supposed to retreat back to its 1967 borders, everybody better get on the bandwagon or you're going to be tossed in the fiery furnace of world ridicule. And it means you better, whatever we want to do, whatever we all concerted together want to do, you better step in line. Well, let's see. 4th, 8th verse of the 3rd chapter. We're back in Daniel. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image, or shall get in line. And whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of the fiery furnace. There are certain Jews who thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Now here you got somebody that's running the very province of Babylon, and they're not going along with this deal. 13th verse. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said unto them, It is true, O Shadrach. Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, at the time that ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, to fall down, why do you suppose God repeats that over and over again? Because that's the kind of a treadmill the world is on. Over and over again, you know. Same old treadmill. The world pipes a song and everybody falls in line, see. Which I have made well. But if you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not even careful to answer thee in this matter. We don't even have to think about it, in other words. We already got our answer. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy God, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, these three fellows right here, for all practical purpose, stand for Israel today. And if you think mankind is not going to get all fired up in fury if they don't knuckle under, you just watch and see the world events. You watch and see. Everybody else is falling in line, and you better too. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them in the burning fire furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, in their hose, in their hats, and their other garments, and were cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace was exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Boy, it must have been a hot fire, wasn't it? Well, when man gets anxious, when man wants somebody to fall in line with his system, he doesn't care what the cost is. He's going to see that whoever doesn't gets paid the price, and it may take a lot of lives, but he's going to have his way anyway. And The 23rd verse, and these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound in the midst of the fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spoke and said unto the counselors, Did ye not cast three men down in the midst of the fire? Then answered, and said unto him, King, true, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see four men, loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near the mouth of a burning fire furnace, and spoke and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth from the midst of the fire, and the princes, and the governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor were the hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Didn't even smell smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel, and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and hath changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Now notice, he sees the power of God, but he's still not claiming them for his God. He's calling them their God, not his God. 29th verse, Therefore I make a decree, in every people, nation, language, who shall speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. And the king pronounced Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego promoted them in the province of Babylon. Now you see, this is a picture of what's going to happen just as soon as the church is raptured. The world, man's political system, as exemplified here in Nebuchadnezzar, is going to give allegiance to God, and is going to acknowledge that he's a God, and that he has great power. But they're not going to acknowledge him as their God. He's going to be a God, you know. Now in the 4th chapter, we're going to have another dream by Nebuchadnezzar, and this dream has to do with the cultural aspect of the world system, the economic, cultural, educational structure. In other words, that which man builds up for the benefit of man, as aside from political ruling structure. It's that which man worships, or that which a man looks to shelter over the human race. Education, civilization, culture. You see, man really believes that if you educate a person well enough, that pretty soon he'll lose his hard heart, and that you won't be there won't be any more criminals and that type of thing. And if you get the environment right, well, everything will be hunky-dory. So all you've got to do is straighten out the culture and the educational aspects, and then everything will fall into line, and we'll have a rosy paradise. Well, that's what this next vision's all about. But we're going to find out what God thinks about that also. You'd think that when you read some of these accounts by the people that say the answer to all of the rebellions in the slums and all of that is more education and better environment and all that, you begin to wonder if they can't see that some of the people that come from the very best environment, you might say, well, just take this Jane Fonda bit. Who are they going to hang that on, see? She doesn't have enough education. She doesn't have enough social privilege. Didn't do her much good, did it? Just read some of the stuff. And man is so stupid. He keeps thinking, he keeps putting his trust in something that just proves of its own self. It never works, never has worked. It's been said that if you educate a thief, that instead of robbing a phone booth, he'll figure out how to hijack a freight train. So you just make him a smarter criminal. You got to do something from the inside. No need to whitewash the outside. So that's what we're going to see next here. See, what we're doing in Daniel, we're showing in symbolic language, we're showing what this world is building in its own wisdom. We're seeing its political structure. We're going to see its social. We've already seen its religious structure. We're going to see, and we've seen its political structure partially. We'll see some more of that. We're going to see its social structure. We're going to see its cultural structure. The Tower of Babel, right? I'm making a name for ourselves, see. But we're going to find also the prophet Daniel faithfully proclaims to us what God thinks of all of these things. We're going to see what man thinks of his own social structure and what man thinks of his own cultural structure. And then we're going to see what God thinks of it and what God's going to do about it. We've already seen now what God's going to do about the world's religious structure. He's going to let the devil destroy it. We've seen what he's going to do about the world's political structure. It's going to be smashed in pieces by the smiting stone. It shall become a great mountain that shall fill the whole earth. Next, we're going to see what's going to happen to the cultural structure. And by culture, I'm talking about your institutional civilization, educational structure, and this, what we call civilization, you might say. Going to see what God has to say about that. And then after that, we'll get into what man thinks of his social progress and his social status and moral status, and then what God thinks of that, shall we say. Dear God, we thank you that you've chosen to include in your word these verities concerning the things that shall be. Lord, we pray that we would not place our trust in the rulers of this world, but that we would seek to know our God and diligently seek to learn what he says about these matters. In Jesus' name, amen.